I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it is actually to be here, but it didn't strike me as unusual until I was actually standing up here. The topic of the presentation, how to pick a CRO to support essentially E&L studies, but it doesn't really take much of a leap of faith or a leap of logic to understand why that is actually a very relevant topic to speak about at a meeting like this. There used to be a time, you mentioned being in the business for 35 years. I do have to say they hired me right out of kindergarten. So, let's take that into effect. But there used to be a time in this industry where most of the major players, especially in pharma, had their own internal E&L organizations, and they did their own studies. So there was a period of time where the need for external resources just didn't exist. Well, the paradigm has changed, and today the fact of the matter is that very few organizations, even the largest organizations, have that capability to do chemical characterization in-house anymore, and the need to find a partner to do those kind of studies, to work with you to do those kind of studies, has just increased with time. The I don't want to call it bad news, but an important consideration with that proliferation of E&L testing is the realization that it's not trivial. You don't get an E&L profile by sticking a pH probe in the sample and reading a number off a meter or anything like that. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Not only just in terms of generating the data, but interpreting the data, because the fact of the matter is a table of structures with concentrations and IDs and so on and so forth is great from an analytical chemistry perspective, but actually gets you nowhere from the perspective of knowing whether I've met the requirements to produce a safe medical device. Okay? The other simple reality, and there's honestly no way to avoid it, is that extractables and leachables testing tends to be extensive and expensive. So it's not an activity where you say to yourself, well, that didn't quite work out the way it should have the first time, so I'll just go back in the lab and repeat it. There's a little bit more to it than that. And I think the third aspect is that organizations that are going out there and looking to find a partner that can help them with chemical characterization studies really need to understand that there are certain fundamental things, actions that they need to do and activities that they need to accomplish in order to make sure that partnership is truly productive. Okay. Again, I'm not sure whether I'm a glass half full or glass half empty kind of guy, but on the positive side, if you're someone out there who's looking to find a partner to help you do chemical characterization, the positive side is there are many, I call them battle-tested, there are many CROs out there who have extensive experience in the field. This is not the first time they've had to do an E&L study, and so that's the good news. The flip side of that is, unfortunately, there are CROs out there who, I'll just say that their expertise is still under development. And even in the best circumstances, it may be the case that a CRO can be very earnest, but sometimes naive. And what I mean by that is really the only the only individual, the only member of this partnership that truly knows your product and truly knows your circumstances is you. So even the competent CRO who looks to be as diligent as they possibly can really can't fit in your shoes. They really can't sit in your seat. So even under the best circumstances, sometimes good intentions aren't realized. And again, I would say that there is no partner. There is no partner who is an effective partner for every particular circumstance and for every particular organization. So that's why it's relevant a little bit to talk about how do you choose the right partner. All right. I'm going to suggest to you that there's a 4-step process for doing that. And interestingly enough, the first step is not something you do externally. It's something that you need to do internally. And that's that you need to position yourself in, I've called it the E&L experience spectrum, because we always have to have our little buzzwords and so on and so forth. But really the whole point is in order to find the right CRO for you, you need to understand what it is that you need. More likely than not, if you and your organization is a novice with respect to E&L, I've never done an E&L study before. I didn't know what E&L was until a year ago, that kind of. You're really looking for a partner who can provide expertise. You're looking for an expert to help you out. And the fact that the matter is that this expert also does testing, that's probably not the important. That's probably not the important thing. The important thing is that you need help to fill the gap in expertise that you don't have. On the other hand, if you're already an E&L expert, more than likely what you're looking for in a CRO is just excess capacity. Hey, I don't have the capacity to do these studies in my own lab. I would do them if I did. I don't, so I just need excess capacity. And so again, finding the best partner to work with is going to be dictated where you find yourself on that experience spectrum. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to advise experts on how they should look for a CRO. Presumably they would be best equipped to do that, but let's turn our focus on the novice. And I've got to tell you, I have great sympathy for the novice who is trying to go out there and find a good CRO. It is a daunting task because of the very expert nature of the E&L process. It is so difficult. It is so difficult to try to establish a good partner, if you can't even speak the language. Again, I don't want to make this sound bad, but you're honestly at the mercy of the CRO to provide you with the expertise you need, and you have absolutely no ability to assess whether that expertise is real or not. And so, again, this is what this slide is trying to convey. The fact of the matter is that the novice looking to identify a partner with respect to chemical characterization is doing so from a position of weakness and not a position of strength. Okay, so recommendation number 1 to a novice is you need to hire. You need to find that expertise. The closest analogy that I can think of is the advice that you always get when you have a medical issue, and that's get a second opinion. Listen to a second opinion. The same advice here is also true. If you yourself do not have the technical expertise to evaluate the capabilities of the individual laboratories that you might be looking to work with, you need to secure that expertise. This is not an activity that you can go into blindly and hope that it works out. And that conductor, if you will, the conductor who is going to be your strategic thinker on this serves exactly the same purpose as a second opinion. This is the person that's going to look at what the CROs have to offer and be able to tell you, is this good science or not? Is this a good study design or not? Is this something you're going to be able to put into a dossier and expect that it'll get no negative feedback from the regulatory agencies? You need to have that perspective. Without that perspective, you might as well just throw darts at a dartboard or flip a coin. Not a very good way to pick stocks in the stock market, not a very good way to pick a CRO who you're going to be working with for conceivably a relatively long period of time, because as this particular slide shows, good intentions don't necessarily produce good outcomes. And it's a little bit late in the game after you've invested months and dollars in a partnership, only to find out that the outcome doesn't meet your expectations. All right, points to consider. Again, it is so simple to come to the wrong conclusion that E&L is all about analytical. All I need to find is a lab that has the right instruments, and that's the lab that I can do my E&O work. Well, the fact of the matter is, in order to design and implement and report an effective chemical characterization assessment, an E&L assessment, you need to be an expert in more than just analytical chemistry. In order for the process to be efficient, you need to be a little bit familiar with polymer chemistry. No analytical chemist, no matter how good they are, does a very good job in characterizing a black box. Everyone struggles with that. And so the test article can't be a black box to the CRO. They have to have sufficient polymer expertise that when you tell them, for example, my device is made out of polyethylene or polypropylene, they can go back and say, well, you know what? I know enough about commercially available polyethylene and polypropylene that I know what the likely additives are. I know what the likely extractables are, and so therefore, it's more likely that when I have my results from the E&L study, I can judge whether those results are comprehensive or not. And then there's the aspect of regulatory science, and I call it regulatory science, but it's an imprecise science. It's a gray science. You heard Ron Brown tell you that toxicology is a gray science. I think regulatory science is well, and that's part of the difficulty. The fact that it is a gray science means that there's not a cookbook. Ted, with all due respect to Part 18 and everything we've been able to accomplish, it is not a cookbook. You cannot open Part 18 and find this is the extraction solvent, this is the extraction time, these are the analytical methods, this is the column you should use, so on and so forth. There is no prescriptive text out there like that. You're making it up as you go along, and you want to have a partner with you who knows what it takes to make up the right story. Okay, identifying potential CRO partners. I'm absolutely convinced that the phone company could make a lot of money if they listed all the organizations that claim to have capabilities in their yellow pages, and it would be as simple as, okay, all I have to do is go to the yellow pages and look for. It reveals how old I really am. No one uses the yellow pages anymore. But hopefully you're not so young that you don't know what the yellow pages were. But so the first, after you've come to grips with what do I need in a CRO, what are my requirements for a CRO, now it becomes a task of just identifying those CROs. And once you've identified them, again, there's no magic. If you go on Google, you use the yellow pages, you use word of mouth, whatever. It's not a difficult thing to identify laboratories that do E&L testing. The next step, and the most important step, though, is to take what's relatively a long list and narrow that list down to the partners that you think are most likely to be suitable for your particular circumstance. And there's a number of factors that you can consider. I've broken them up into 4 categories, essential resources, or 3 categories: essential resources, essential experiences, and then the intangibles. And so let's walk through each one of those really quickly. I'm not going to try to educate you in terms of what a comprehensive analytical portfolio is for E&L, but I will say that maybe the most important essential technical requirement is that the CRO be well equipped. Well equipped not only to deal with the routine, but well equipped also to deal with the non-routine. You don't want a CRO, for example, to tell you, I can't identify this unknown. The most highly desirable CRO is to say, you know what, in our first pass, we couldn't get an identity, but that just means we need to do more testing. And oh, by the way, all we need is your go-ahead, and we'll start that testing. Again, you don't want to get to the scenario in the middle of the study that you now have to find another laboratory to get the ID. You really don't want to do that. That's time that's better spent somewhere else. So certainly an instrumentation inventory is a significant part of that. Essential skills. The instrument, we're rapidly moving to the frontier of AI and instruments that'll run themselves and so on and so forth, but we're not there yet. As important as the instruments are, so too is it important in who's running the instruments and who's getting the data that the instruments produce and converting that data into information. Data is relatively useless unless it's been interpreted and converted into information. So you're looking, for example, for a partner who has the skill necessary to design and justify an E&L study. Because I can guarantee you the first thing that a reviewer is going to look at after they've looked at your study design is how did they justify the study design? Why did they pick that temperature? Why did they pick that solvent? Why did they pick that duration? Okay? So you're gonna need a partner that not only understands the whys, but can articulate the whys in such a way that another organization can appreciate the good science. So often people think that E&L is just about the instrumentation. Well, before you can put something on an instrument, the device, the packaging, the component used in manufacturing, doesn't matter. It has to be extracted. So I'm looking for a CRO that not only speaks analytical chemistry, but understands simple concepts like partitioning, and so on and so forth. How many stoppers, for example, or how many gaskets from a medical device can I squeeze into a bottle before I violate all the known chemical and physical laws with respect to partitioning? I mean, obviously you need to have experts who know how to run the instruments. You also need someone who is capable of differentiating between bad data and good data, or let's call it good data and not so good data. Good data and not so good data. All data all data is not good or bad until you've actually thought, about it. You know, there's nothing about data that it raises its hand and says, oh, by the way, I'm bad data. Ignore me. You know, you have to have someone who's experienced enough to be able to recognize that there's no way that this compound that I've identified by my best hit with a Mr. Wiley, there's no way that this compound could have come from this device. There's just, you know, I've got a confident ID. You know, it's 99% match factor. But the fact of the matter is, there's no way that this compound could have come from this device. You need a partner who's able to look at the data and know those kinds of things. The skills necessary to report the analytical data. You know, I've made a living, 35 years of reading tables of analytical data and complaining to whoever will listen that this is not, you know, I know why you've constructed the table for your convenience, but it's not very convenient for me. I really don't care what the list of to have extractables listed as a function of retention time. I want to look at a table, and the number one compound listed on the table should be the compound that shows up at the highest concentration. I mean, isn't that what everyone wants to know when they look at a table of extractables? What's the compound at the highest concentration? So you need to be able to work with a CRO who understands what the data needs to look like when you turn it over to a regulator. And it's different than the way the data looks like when it comes off the machine. Essential experiences, let's be honest. You know, the thing that freaks me out most about working with a CRO is when and it freaks me out too when I'm sitting on a cot in a doctor's office. Hey, I've never seen that before. Won't this be fun? You know, I don't want to pay a CRO to get their learning experience at my expense. I want to find a CRO who someone else has already paid for them to have that experience. So there is no substitute. There is no substitute for experience in a CRO, and it's got to be applicable experience. You know, again, this is a medical device meeting. I don't want a CRO who's told me, yeah, I've been in the pharma world for 20 or 30 years, because some of what works in the pharma world doesn't work too well in the medical device world. So experience is important. Relevant experience is even more important. Okay. As a person who writes standards, in that you can't write a standard based on knowledge that you keep to yourself. So one of the things that I personally look for in selecting a CRO is service to the field. Okay, and what do I mean? What do I mean by that? I mean those CROs who take an active role in terms of developing standards and supporting the development of standards. I really have no patience with CROs who complain but don't actually then help with fixing the issue. So I would propose to you that a reasonable question to ask a CRO that you're looking to work with is, okay, what is your participation in the field? Are members of your organization intimately entwined in the standard setting process? Have you contributed resources to trying to move the standard of science forward? And again, I think it's a personal bias, but those organizations that can answer that question, yes. Yeah, I participated to the development of standards. I actually publish the good science that I invent. I don't keep it to myself. Those not only are those good CROs to work with, but those are probably the most experienced CROs. Okay, one of the major questions that a novice has the most difficult time understanding when they're looking at a list of CROs is, what does it mean? What is good science? When a CRO claims that they do good science, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do I recognize it? Well, so here's a metric. Here's a metric to do that. And I'm not going to go through each one of these. There's not enough time. There's not enough time to do that. But the point is that there is a metrics. There is a way to establish. There is a way to judge the level of science that's done in an organization, whether that's an external organization or an internal organization, and it boils down to how routinely have they adopted those kinds of practices that many people feel are pushing the envelope. Because pushing the envelope is ultimately where you want your partner to be. That CRO who is as close to the envelope as they can comfortably be is likely to be that organization that does the best level of science. We start out with a list of 20 possible CROs. We've narrowed it down to a list of 5 that we rigorously do an assessment of. Now we've picked one. We've identified who our partner is, and we want to qualify. We want to qualify. I won't say validate, but we want to. We want to validate that our choice was a good one. We want to qualify that partner. I think everyone understands that involves some kind of technical audit, but I want to give you a little bit of practical experience as well. I don't care how good the technical fit is. There has to be a vibe between you and the CRO. You have to be comfortable working with each other. You have to be comfortable that you speak the same language. You have to be comfortable with the idea that you both are willing to accept the profound responsibility that you have for making sure your medical device is safe. Okay, so there's an intangible aspect of this qualification that we as scientists sometimes forget to do, or sometimes think it's below us to do because it's touchy-feely kind of stuff. I can't tell you how important that is, because this partner that you're going to work with, you're going to work with them for a long period of time. And if you don't like them, or they don't like you, or you're not comfortable around that, that's just going to cause all sorts of problems. There's the financial aspect of it. You should have comparable financial models, so that when it comes time to make payments and so on and so forth, bad blood doesn't happen. There's just practical things like that. When I was a little bit younger and a little bit more idealistic, I thought that it was great advice. Well, in 2013, when I first published this, I thought it was great advice to tell people that you should do a mock study with the CRO, because there's no better way to judge whether you're going to like the output to actually see the output. I realize in today, who's got time and money to actually put a fake study into a CRO, but I think you really need to spend some time, asking them what would the output of a typical study look like. Maybe it doesn't mean you implement a study, but maybe you ask them to generate a protocol. Here's my scenario. Let's generate a protocol. You go, or a proposal, whatever you want to call it. And then, because it's then when you have a proposal in front of you that you can actually make the case that the proposal fits. I know that in today's world, we buy things online and we don't worry about whether they fit or not. When I was younger and I bought shoes, I tried them on to make sure that they fit. I didn't want to walk out of that store with a pair of shoes that didn't fit. So that's my advice. That's my advice here as well. Work with the CRO to get an idea as to what their work product will look like and see if that work product fits. I think it's a really, I don't know a more effective measure of a CRO's ability to hear your story than to ask the question, how much time have they spent? How much time have they spent with me trying to design a study that specifically fits me? Again, I've always hated the shoe salesman that showed me shoes that they thought I would like, that I didn't really want. I didn't really want those shoes, but boy, they sure wanted me to buy those shoes. And so the same thing is true for you. You need to be very clear in asking the question, am I just getting their one-size-fits-all kind of solution, or are they developing for me a solution that is effective and efficient in my particular circumstance? Because I want it to be right, and I don't want it to cost any more than it needs to cost. I don't want to be cheap, but I don't want it to cost any more than it needs to cost. There are a number of questions that you can ask in terms of your technical audit. I don't think it's much of a value for me to go through each one of these, but please use the presentation as a resource in terms of what are the kinds of things you might ask or what are the kinds of things you might look for. But again, if you get a mock proposal or a mock protocol, don't skip the extraction step. The extraction step is important because garbage in is garbage out. It's as simple as that. I don't care how good your analytical capability is. If you muff up the extraction, you've wasted your time and money. Okay, so don't forget the extraction. There are certain things that you need to ask them about the analysis. Simple things like, hey, if the FDA asked, why did you use this particular instrument in this particular column? I've got a reason. What's my sensitivity? Is my sensitivity adequate to get down to the AET? And if it's not, what am I going to do about it? How do you know that I'm not missing anything? You've heard numerous speakers tell you that the worst possible outcome of an E&L assessment is, I think I missed something. I found something and didn't identify it. That's bad enough. But if in the back of your mind you have the sense, I think I missed something, that's probably a pretty bad outcome. So you really want to ask your partner, oh, by the way, partner who I'm going to be working with for the next 3 or 4 years and potentially spending an awful lot of money with, how do you know that you're not missing something? And oh, by the way, what are you going to do if it turns out that you did miss something? Okay? Again, I naively thought that there was a place in the world for running trial runs. If there's a place in your world for doing it, I can offer some suggestions on what that should look like. I would only say that if you're going to do a trial run, make it a fair one. Don't say, hey, I'm going to torture my potential partner by giving them the hardest material that I've ever encountered and expect them to do a good job. Give them a test circumstance that's certainly challenging, but not impossible, because really that's not what that's not what you're trying to judge. You're not trying to find a partner who can do the impossible. You're trying to find a partner who can help you manage what is possible. So take that into account. Don't forget the debriefing. When all of this is done and you're happy with the partner, don't immediately jump into a study. Take a few moments to do a debriefing. Remember what it was that you had difficulties with. Remember those things that you didn't necessarily like about your partnership, and take one last chance to ask yourself, did I fix it? If I identified a problem in our relationship, did I fix it? Take that one step, because if you didn't, I can guarantee you it's going to come up as an issue at the most inopportune the inopportune time. So take the time to do debriefing. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be extensive, but make sure that if you learned a lesson along the way, that lesson stays learned. Okay, so concluding thoughts. Needing external resources to do your E&L work is a reality. It's the new norm. The fact of the matter is, though, that this is not like tying your shoes or measuring pH. This is a complicated thing, and you need to have you need to pay attention to your choice of a CRO. I mean, I'll just jump to the bottom. Point number 8. Point number 8 is the suffering that comes from choosing the wrong CRO is never ending. You never stop regretting that mistake. So the more work that you do up front to make sure that you have the right partner, the better off you'll be in the end. Thank you.